Okay, so good morning. We're just going to have a little bit of chat about loneliness, psychotherapy being a lonely profession. It's kind of come up from something we were talking about last week around Campaign for Connection and trying to think of ways that we could make it relevant to psychotherapy. So I guess that's where we're at right now. And we kind of stopped our conversation last week thinking we don't want to waste all the good stuff. So what have you been thinking since then?
To be honest, I tried to just put it to one side so that we could come here and have the spontaneous discussion like we always do. I know we've worked together now since 2014 and we all have such fantastic philosophical discussions and I'm hoping to have that here now. I think what I think I've really noticed with putting together Counselling West Bridgeford, and I know until now the face has been me and that's all that's been seen, but actually what I'm really aware of, both because of the Campaign for Connection but also because of COVID-19, but because of our profession as well, I suppose, is that how lonely it can feel.
Yeah.
And actually having that team in the background that's you and the others who were there as part of Team Huts, as we call it, which is for another day, what that is, it's really important because it's just, we can be on our own with our clients.
Yeah, and I guess that's part of why we called it the lonely professions, because it is inherently isolating.
Yeah.
Well, essentially because we're not allowed to talk about it with anybody else. So when we have client work, we're not allowed to say anything about it outside of, even in supervision, really. We don't go into content. We tend to talk more about our own process.
Yeah.
So, it can be difficult. It can feel like you're on your own with it.
Yeah.
And I guess where I kind of wanted to go with this, to really start the discussion, was how different it is being in private practice as opposed to being in training. Because when we start practicing psychotherapy, we are generally part of an organisation. We usually have quite rigorous supervision to make sure that we're working properly with clients. And we also have the training organisation that has a lot of, impact on how we are, how we present ourselves. But once you move into private practice, that all kind of goes and it's just you.
I think you're right, and because we're just on the start of that journey of discovering what that will be like, and I'm glad we're having the conversation now because we need to be really aware of that, because that isolation, one thing we do learn as a training organisation, isn't it? It's about what can happen to us if we don't have those structures in place to support us, and actually we're not only harm to ourselves but to clients too. The training organisation, I'm really aware what you say about how it influences how we are, is that I was always really aware of what we'd studied at the last contact weekend and what I was writing about in my practice with my clients.
Yeah.
And since I finished training, and of course we both have been practicing since we finished our training, not having that, missing that in some way, having that strong anchor into what we were studying.
Yeah, so something about the literature that we were looking at and the way we were discussing that in the university setting, how that influenced the way you practice.
Yeah.
So that it wasn't really a particularly rigid structure, but there was some structure there to kind of point us in the right direction of what we were reading.
Yeah, and actually I'm thinking out loud now, but almost as if those books and our colleagues and tutors actually were almost in the room with us, obviously metaphorically, but in our minds because of those discussions we've had, and actually that's gone now, and it is us on our own. It's me on my own with my client in this space.
So does it feel more lonely?
Does it feel more lonely? What I'm holding is the answer is it's kind of yes, but then I'm not sure to what extent that is that moving out of training now, that part of it, versus starting a business, the risk that involves, and also the restrictions due to COVID-19.
It's hard to separate those strands.
Yeah.
As to what it is that's actually feeling isolating about that.
Yeah.
I guess for me, during lockdown, I was doing a lot of telephone work, and I'm still doing that. I haven't started seeing clients face to face yet, and I have felt isolated even from my clients. That face to face contact is really important for me. There's so much that you miss out on when you're doing telephone work, even meetings like this.
Yeah.
There's that lack of physical connection that feels quite important.
Yeah. Yeah, can you say more about that physical connection, what that means?
Yeah, and I guess I wonder whether it's something to do with the way we were trained as well. We were always trained to work face to face. During my training, there was never a mention of going into video work or telephone work. It was always the aim to be face to face, because we'd never experienced anything like COVID before. But now all of a sudden that's the norm, and I feel like I'm unprepared for it. And actually the existing clients that I have been great to work with on the phone, but it is different.
Can you imagine what it would have been like if we would have been talking about telephone and video work at uni?
I can imagine the length of the discussions we would have had. It would have lasted days.
Yeah, several weekends it would have been a subject matter. And if you'd have asked me, well, I've said this so many times, if you'd asked me 6 months ago about telephone and video, it'd have been no, and it's not the same, I'm not doing that. And yet here we are. And actually I've learned that actually there is some value, but as you say, it's not the same.
No, and it is different, and it does change the nature of the relationship, I think, with clients. And I guess from my personal experience, it's much easier to cancel a session when it's on the phone.
Oh, okay.
Right. And from my perspective too, it's much easier to sit in my pajamas and not bother too much about what I look like, which is nice, but also...
Is that important?
Yeah, well, in some ways, yeah, because it's a certain headspace that I have to get into when I'm practicing, and that's kind of slipped a little bit. So I think I need to get back into that professional headspace. Yeah. Not that I was unprofessional, but it's just, I guess, a relaxing of the rules, maybe. Yeah. My own personal rules. There's no actual rule about. Yeah.
You should have seen me yesterday trying to decide what to wear. Because yesterday was my first day of in-person work, since lockdown, but also in private practice. And what does one wear? I just sort of, I even remember discussing it for hours at uni, thinking, for God's sake, here we are.
Yeah.
There I was. What do I wear?
And I'm laughing, but I also have a counselling wardrobe. I also have a set of clothes that I wear just when I'm counselling. It's very strange. I tend to wear makeup too when I'm counselling, which I don't normally bother with.
There's something about getting into the counselling headspace of being able to go, right, this is it now, I'm here for my clients.
Yeah, and being very aware that actually image matters. Much as I hate to say it, but it does. First impressions matter.
Yeah.
So what do I want to present? I have to think about that. Probably more. So I guess one of the other things that I was thinking about this week is the idea of professional isolation, that professional loneliness being a contributory factor to burnout.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know the extent to which, again, it's like separating the strands. I don't know how easy it would be to say, yes, that is the case. But I wonder about it. Wonder whether actually in private practice it's easier to let those warning signs slide by.
Yeah. Yeah. And why would that be, do you think? What's your thinking? Because we need it to pay our bills? Is it that we've got rent to pay and
I think
salaries?
There is that. And I think also there's the idea of that weight of responsibility becoming very heavy, and if you're not careful, not having somebody around who can notice the signs. I mean, luckily we have a great supervisor who would not hesitate to flag it up if she thought that we were taking on too much. She's very hot on self-care, which is great for me. But if we didn't have that, where would we be taking on too much? And
for me, I think there's some value in that, and why this, you and I are doing this together. In that, actually, I know one of the things I took from, I think it was last week on my to-do list was, I can't remember the exact words, but something like take time out. And actually and equally you saying, when are you going to stop doing X, Y, and Z? And actually made me stop. And I think I think there is a risk that in private practice, where often therapists are working on their own in their spare room, or if they're lucky, their garden office at bottom of the garden, that could be the case, especially not getting out anywhere, not being part of some other organisation. I do think there's a risk there. And I wondered during lockdown whether actually that was what was happening. People having distance supervision, and thinking that distance therapy was perhaps not quite as mentally arduous as physical face-to-face therapy. But actually that's not the case. We're taking on just as much as we would be if we were seeing clients in the room together. We're still having to connect, aren't we? And actually, and perhaps work harder because we have less to work on. So it's we don't have, and because we were we're person-centered, but there's also person-centered experiential therapists, and that experience is part of what's happening in the room. And so we have to work harder because we don't have any visual. I've been doing mainly, all exclusively telephone work in private practice so far, not by what clients want rather than what I want. And so having only be able to hear, not know what someone looks like, I think you have to work harder for that. It's difficult. And I guess for me it's slightly different because I've been working with clients that I've been working with for quite a while, a year, 18 months. So that switch to telephone work wasn't quite so challenging as it would be if I was taking on new clients. And in the organisation that I volunteer for, there was quite a serious discussion about whether the first session should be face-to-face with clients, just so that you get that initial connection rather than starting straight away with telephone work. So that idea of connection is kind of a thread that's gone through the whole. It's a theme, isn't it? It's a theme that comes up time and time again. It is. It's that connection. It's through everything. So it's connection with clients, but also connection with each other. The professional connections that we build and maintain are as important, if not more so in some ways, because not only do we get to share our experience, not content, but our process, but we also get to share best practice too. So if somebody else is doing something really well, we want to know about it so that we can perhaps take on those ideas in our own practice. Something I really remember from being a trainee, I was particularly at Leicester Counselling Centre, where we had a space where we would congregate if we didn't have clients, counsellors we would congregate together. And I know, and it was a mix of different modalities, so having that rich discussion. We don't talk about client stories, as you said, but actually talking about how we work, about what the kind of things we're encountering, how we respond. That connection to our fellow counsellors in that way. I think I actually miss that, if I'm honest, having that. And it's why I'm keen that, this grows not just me and you, it becomes something bigger where we are creating that space that's safe for counsellors, where we're connected to each other. So creating that community where we can get the value of each other. So is there an ethical side to maintaining connection? Does that become an ethical principle that we make sure we are, fostering those connections with each other? Definitely. And I completely agree. Yeah, I think so. It's not just part of our own. It's interesting. I was about to say not part of our own mental well-being, but actually it's a few things. It is our own mental well-being, and it is about how we are with our clients. It's professional obligation, ethical obligation. It's so my own mental health, and then the ethical obligation to myself and clients.
I agree.
Yeah, that we need to do that, and I think it'd be easy to miss.
Very. Yeah, I guess that's where I kind of wanted to go with the idea of burnout, because it is so easy to miss those signs. Yeah. And if you're part of a community, if you're part of a network of therapists, of supervisors, of anybody really that can spot those things, and if you haven't noticed yourself, maybe say, hang on, what's going on there? What's that about? What are you doing to take care of yourself?
Just something come into my head. Sorry, I'm rewinding a little bit because come into my mind. I don't know. Obviously my work at NTU. Why have I suddenly ignored them in all of this? Because actually I was working at the university till March, part of a, and this is really interesting. I think how I'd like to talk about a little bit about how that team suddenly, spontaneously, actually managed that, because before lockdown we would see each other. There were 2 or 3 people who I'd have that connection with and who were there as a support, and as you said, would notice, and my boss that I'd have regular contact with. When we went to lockdown, I was really proud of being part of the team, because what we really realized really quickly was that whilst before lockdown we'd formally congregated twice a month, but it was always on the day I didn't work, so I'd go once a month, maybe, because I had to go doing other work, not because I didn't want to or couldn't be bothered, but actually I had to be elsewhere for other work. But once we went to lockdown and we'd started to settle down, we realised that we needed more than that, and we met via Teams every single Wednesday without fail. And sometimes it was just admin, but very often it went into a supervisory kind of, it wasn't called supervision, it wasn't strictly supervision, but because we were all professional psychotherapists, then we were actually able to do that support of one another. And it was so wonderful in that not everyone every week, but I think at some point, every individual was struggling at some point, because we all were at some point and felt really able to share some of that and actually get support from the group.
Yeah.
But I think, so forgive me, this one thing is, I'm not sure, and I don't really know that could have happened if we hadn't had the offline relationship to start with.
That's interesting, because I was just thinking as you were talking that actually maybe that's one of the takeaways that we can go forward with from lockdown, from the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe that's one of the things we take away, is that importance of maintaining those connections, of building those relationships with one another, whether it's people we trained with, people that we've come to know post-qualification. Supervisory groups are so important, and just making sure that we keep in touch and keep contacting. And sometimes it's not always convenient, but actually it is always necessary.
And how have you been finding that over lockdown?
I found it really hard, not maintaining the connections, but actually it took me a while to register that the connections were there for me to pick up. I found a depth of anxiety that I'd never experienced before during lockdown. And that was eased both professionally and personally by picking up those threads of friendship and connection and professionalism that were always there, but I'd never relied on before. So yeah, that's definitely something that's come out for me.
So actually realising the importance of that, and bringing those offline relationships online while we were unable to meet up. Cinema afternoon,
very important. And I guess that's one of the things that we've carried on.
It is.
That might need a bit of explanation.
So I mean, Jenny you are a lover of cinema, and I, from time to time, will join you at your visits to the cinema. Anyway, so I don't even know how it came about, but watching the same film at the same time, although we're in different places.
Yeah.
And to start with, I have to say, did it come from me? Or was it from you?
I think it was your suggestion, but I think I carried it on.
Yeah, I don't think I got it from somewhere else anyway. I definitely wasn't my own idea. I picked it, and I didn't know if it was going to be a bit lame, but there is something, I don't know. I find it really odd that it's so enjoyable although you're watching a film, to know that someone else is watching it at the same time.
Yeah, and sometimes I have little chats during the film.
Yeah, commentary.
Yeah, we do a little commentary of our own. But yeah, that's something that's carried on, and we've been doing that since it must be 12 weeks or longer.
Well, how long does it take to watch? Did you start with Harry Potter?
Started with Harry Potter.
Then Lord of the Rings.
And The Hobbit.
Yes. And Pirates of the Caribbean. However long, whatever that adds up to.
Yeah. So it's been a while, and actually, I still like it. I still enjoy it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, on to the next series this week, so I'm looking forward to that. But it's a way, do you think, and I guess that, is that because we had the offline relationship that taking it online made valuable?
Yeah. And it was an interesting one, because I was a bit sceptical at first, thinking, I'm not sure what this is going to be like. But actually, it was really fun. And it was a very easy way to stay connected. Yeah. It took no real effort at all. Yeah. And yet it's become something quite enjoyable.
Yeah. And I know I chose that because we do it on an afternoon, and I remember saying, actually, the afternoons that seem really long for me, and I think about risk on an afternoon of feeling lonely, and so we did that, and that became the Saturday afternoon, 2:30 became the regular date.
Yeah.
And we'll see how that continues when in a year or two.
Yeah.
In a year or two.
We'll be run out of films.
I think you will be a while before you run out, though.
Yeah.
You've got this for us. Oh God, yeah. I'm just going to check the time. Okay. Oh yeah, 24 minutes. So
about right.
Yeah, we're doing all right.
Is there anything more that you wanted to say?
Oh, I was just going to ask you the same question.
I'm not sure. Nothing off the top of my head occurs to me to add to what we've been talking about, but there's some real value in the recognition of that need for connection professionally, as well as in friendship groups. Yeah. And how the two can actually be linked when you're friends with other psychotherapists. Yeah. It does help. Yeah. It really does, and because then it's almost a shortcut. I mean, yeah. Those sessions then with friends who are also psychotherapists, it can become a form of peer supervision, in the sense that we get to share best practice, we get to share the way we're working, what reading we've come across, anything interesting that we think the other might benefit from. Yeah, sure. I know, I do agree. It's just so important, but we have to work at it, I think. Yeah. Whereas when we were trainees, it was just there on a plate for us, either through our training organisation or our placements. Yeah. And although, and I'd had it in my job for, however many months it was, 6 months or so until lockdown. Well, for 9 months, sorry, until the end of term. Yeah. And now that has gone, I think you're right. It's really, we have to maintain that we will have to work at it. It's not in the plate. No. For us anymore. Not now. No. And we are on our own, but it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to feel like that. Yeah. Quite cool when hopefully we get, we'll get the clients coming to us, and actually we can invite other psychotherapists to join us. That's exciting too. Yeah, and then we'll build that community so we can all feel professionally supported, and and actually, I don't know, I want to say something like have a professional life rather than scraping a living, which is what
Often it seems to be, particularly at the beginning. So yeah. Anything else from you?
No, I don't think so.
How's it been doing it as a video? We should do that.
Actually.
We probably should replay that. Yeah. I don't feel quite as fluent as when I've been aware the whole time that we're recording and that this will go public. So it's not quite as free as perhaps when it's just me and you together.
No, but we have, I guess, been more aware of the silence. There's the space between words than we would normally.
Yeah. We normally just sit and let the silence percolate. Yeah, I've definitely felt that today as we've been going along. Cool.
Should we leave it there?
Yeah, is that
do you want to do some ending?
Yeah, I suppose it's just, how we conclude this, what we want to say. It's our final messages, really. We've done that. We've done that, I guess, already. It's like the importance of that professional connection. And it is a lonely profession. We have to put the work into.
Yeah, I think the key for me is working at it. Not being complacent, actually actively and proactively thinking about how are we going to get our connection, how are we going to maintain our professional selves.
See you soon.